Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today we will be talking about the important works of Anglo-Saxon period. Poems were given more importance in the Anglo-Saxon period. That is, prose came much later. During the Anglo-Saxon period, there are three types of poem, namely the heroic, lyric, and Christian poetry. Except for a few scattered poems, most of the English poetic material we possess were recorded in four manuscripts. So the four most important manuscripts of the Anglo-Saxon period were Vercelli Book, Novel Codex, Exeter Book, and Junius Manuscript, also known as Cadman Manuscript. So we'll be talking about the three types of poetry of the Anglo-Saxon literature. First is the heroic poetry. So the very first poem of the Anglo-Saxon period was Beowulf. Beowulf is known as the greatest heroic poem written in all English. It was written in the 7th century. Until today, we have no idea of who wrote this poem. The length of the poem is more than 3,000 lines. And unlike normal poems, it doesn't rhyme. It doesn't have a rhyming scheme. So as far as the literary device is concerned, this poem uses alliteration and stressed poetic lines. This poem was translated by J.R.R. Tolkien and William Morris. Another important point to note is Tolkien has illustrated many of the features of Old English poetry in his 1940 essay titled On Translating Beowulf. So let us talk about the plot summary of Beowulf. The story of Beowulf is set in Denmark, and it is the story about a young and brave warrior named Beowulf from southern Sweden. So Beowulf was sent to Denmark to help the king, Rodgar. There was a lake monster called Grendel who used to trouble the king and the people. So Beowulf was sent to Denmark to help the king get rid of this monster. Beowulf fought with the monster barehanded and he killed him. So Grendel's mother came to seek revenge, but again Beowulf killed her too. Later, Beowulf became the king and ruled his kingdom peacefully for 50 years. And after 50 years, another dragon attacked the country. Beowulf fought the dragon, but he was wounded very badly and he succumbed to his wounds. After his death, his people cremated his body and erected a tower in his loving memory. So the next heroic poetry is Waldir. This poem is about the legend of Walder of Aquitaine. It tells the story of Waldir and Hildegard who fall in love and steal a treasure from Attila's court where they are being held captive. Two men, Gunthir, a Burgundian king, and Hagina were on the lookout of Waldir and Hildegard. These two men were looking for Waldir and Hildegard's treasure. So the poem is about the conflict between the two parties that is about to occur. The third heroic poetry is called Fight at Finnsburg. This Old English heroic poem talks about a battle in which Hnaf and his 60 retainers are at a fort called the Finns Fort, where they are defending themselves by keeping the attackers away from attacking the fort. The last and the final heroic poetry is called Widsith, also known as the Traveler's Song. This poem talks about the people, the kings, and the heroes of Europe during the heroic age of Northern Europe. This poem is found in the Exeter manuscript or the Exeter book. We will move to the next kind of poetry, that is lyric poetry. The first poem is called Wanderer. An old man recalls an attack that happened in his youth. His family and friends were killed in the attack. The memories of the attack are still with him. In this poem, he preaches that one should remain calm and resolve matters peacefully rather than fighting and killing people. The next poem is called Seafarer. Seafarer basically means a sailor. The poem describes the life of a sailor. It describes the harsh realities of sea life in winters. The sailor compares the anxious feeling, cold, wetness, and loneliness of sea life with life on land where men are surrounded by friends and family, safe from danger, and are very well fed. But despite everything, the poet yearns for the sea voyage. This poem has been translated several times and most notably by Ezra Pound, one of the most famous American poets. The third poem is Wife's Lament. The focus of the poem is the female speaker's grief and her state of despair. She expresses her deep sorrow over her husband's departure. Next, Dior's Lament. Dior is a singer who has been banished by his lord. He is very attached to his lord, so he mourns. Later, he gets over his grief and he tries to console himself by recalling other people's sorrow. He tells himself, "This too shall pass." He was hopeful that his lord will forgive him one day and call him back again. The last lyric poetry is called Husband's Message. The poem tells the story about a man who was forced to leave his family and wife to go to war. Years later, he is wealthy and writes a message for his wife on a blank. In the letter, he talks about their years apart, his past bad luck, his love for her, and asking her to join him in his new home. Now let's jump to the next kind of poetry, that is Christian poetry. The first poem is called Cadman's Hymn. Cadman is a shepherd who cannot sing. In the monastery, there is a practice of passing the harp. Whoever has the harp has to sing, so the harp is a musical instrument. People don't pass the harp to Cadman because of his lack of singing skills. Cadman has a dream in which God asks him to write and sing about his creation. When Cadman wakes up, he can sing. Cadman is called first English poet and Anglo-Saxon Milton. His only known surviving work is the Cadman's Hymn, which is a 9-line alliterated vernacular prose poem which is in honor of God. The next poem is Bede's poem. His most well-known work is the History of the English People that is written in Latin. This book focuses on the history of development of Christianity in England and is written in Old English. It was written in Latin but translated to Old English by King Alfred. The book has an interesting tale about Cadman. The third poem is Cenewulf's poem. Cenewulf is famous for his religious compositions. He was regarded as one of the preeminent figures of Anglo-Saxon Christian poetry. He became popular because he was one of the few poets who used to sign their poems. The last poem is called Dream of the Rood. Rood is the cross of Jesus Christ. The poem follows the dream of the narrator. The narrator is having a conversation with the cross. The poem is divided into 3 sections. In the first part, we can see the vision of the cross. In the second part, the cross tells the story about the death of Jesus. The cross is then resurrected and adorned with gold and silver. In the third part, the author gives reflection about this vision. The vision fades away, leaving the man alone with his thoughts. He praises God for what he has witnessed and is filled with hope for eternal life and the desire to be near the glorious cross once more. That's all for the Anglo-Saxon poetry. Next, we will talk a little bit about the Anglo-Saxon prose. Anglo-Saxons were big on poetry, and since they were invaders, they did not bring with them prose. They brought with them poetry as they believed that poems were artistic. Prose, in fact, was developed due to the Christianization in England. It was King Alfred who made a huge contribution to Anglo-Saxon prose. He encouraged education be imparted in English and not Latin. He translated several books, many of them were religious, from Latin into Old English. He started Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, a periodical publication that continued for 300 years. It is important as it provides a detailed historical record of Anglo-Saxon period. So that's all for today. I'll meet you in my next video.